Deep beneath the border of France and Switzerland, inside a 27-kilometer ring of magnets, humanity is chasing the very heartbeat of the universe.
This is CERN, the world's most powerful laboratory, where the language spoken is purely mathematical and God is the logic. But as you walk towards the entrance of this pinnacle of 21st century science, you are met with a strange sight. A 2-meter tall bronze statue of Lord Nataraja. Shiva performing his cosmic dance of Tandav. It feels like a paradox. Why does a place dedicated to smashing subatomic particles honor an ancient deity, is the question.
The directors of CERN weren't just being poetic. They were acknowledging that the pulse of the universe discovered in their multi-billion-dollar lab was first felt in the silence of the ancient woods.
We are taught in our textbooks that atomic age began in a 19th century European lab with John Dalton. But what if I told you that the answers they were seeking were known like 2500 years ago in the ancient forest of India?
Today, we go back to 600 BCE to meet the man modern science forgot.
Rishi Kanad, the prophet of physics. History remembers him as Rishi Kanad, but his birth name was Kashyap. Legend tells us he was a man of immense humility, often seen walking behind harvesters, picking up single grains of rice left in the dirt. People mocked him, calling him Kanada, literally the atom eater or the one who lives on grains. But what they didn't realize that while he was gathering food for his body, he was actually dissecting the fabric of the universe in his mind. One day, while breaking a grain of rice, Kanad arrived at a profound realization. He saw that you could divide matter, a grain, a stone, a drop of water, into smaller parts. But logic told him this couldn't go on forever. If you could divide matter infinitely, you would eventually reach nothingness. And from nothing, how could something be created? He used a brilliant mathematical argument. He said, if matter is infinitely divisible, then both a tiny mustard seed and a giant mountain would be composed of an infinite number of parts. And since they both have infinite parts, then logically they both should be of the same size. But since they aren't, there must be a final unit of matter, a smallest possible particle that just cannot be broken. He called this the Anu, or more precisely speaking, the Parmanu. In his work, Vaisheshika Sutra, chapter 4, section 1, verse 1, he defines this particle in detail. Sata akaranam nityam svayam siddham sanatanam yata sarvam pravartat tadeva paramam padam, which means that Sat, or the absolute reality, is causeless and eternal, self-existent and timeless. From it, everything arises. That alone is the supreme state. Kanad defined the Parmanu through 3 absolute properties. Nitya, or eternal. It cannot be created or destroyed. It is the God particle of its time. Akarana, or causeless. It is the cause of everything, but nothing caused it. It is the ultimate building block. Atindriya, or supersensible. It is too small to be seen by the eye. It can only be perceived through the yogic mind or pure logic. Long before the first microscope, Kanad had mapped the invisible. Karna didn't stop at a single atom. He knew that a single Parmanu couldn't create a giant mountain or a human being on its own. They just had to combine. He proposed that 2 atoms come together to form a Dvinuka, what we today call a diatomic molecule. And when three of these pairs combined, they formed a trinuka, a particle large enough to be seen in a streak of sunlight. Think about the precision here, okay? In the 7th chapter, 1st section, and the 8th verse of the Vaisheshika Sutra, he talks about the different dimensions or the Parmanu that arises when these particles just cluster together. 2000 years before the Western chemistry even existed, Kanad was describing the fundamental building blocks of modern molecular biology. But here is the real mystery. Why do atoms stick together at all? Why doesn't the universe just dissolve into a cloud of dust? Modern physics explains this through the fundamental forces of nature, especially the electromagnetic force, the invisible interaction that binds electrons to atoms and atoms to each other. In 2012, scientists at CERN confirmed the existence of the Higgs boson, revealing the presence of the Higgs field, an invisible field that permeates all of space and gives fundamental particles their mass. Now listen to Kanad. He argued that the motion and union of atoms are governed by the Adrishta or the unseen force. In Vaisheshika Sutra, chapter 5, section 2, verse 13, he says, Manigamanam susiyabhisarpanam drishtakaranakam, which means the movement of a jewel or the attraction of a needle toward a magnet is caused by Adrishta. He was saying that there is a hidden intelligence in the vacuum of space that tells matter how to behave. Kanad went even further. He introduced the concept of samavaya, or the universal inherence. It's the idea that the relationship between a cloth and its threads, a particle and its mass, is inseparable. Modern quantum field theory says exactly the same thing. A particle is not a thing that exists in a field, it is a vibration of the field itself. The dancer and the dance are one. What we call the Higgs field today, Kanad identified it as the invisible will of the universe. This is the linchpin of physics. The Higgs boson is often called the God particle because it is the giver of mass. It makes the intangible tangible. 2,500 years ago, Kanad understood that our solid world is actually an illusion sustained by an invisible, inherent force. He didn't need any kind of accelerator to find the link pin. He just needed to look at the silence between the atoms. One of the biggest questions in ancient physics was, how does matter change? How does a green mango turn yellow, or a soft piece of clay become a hard red pot? Karna then answered this with a theory called Pilupaka or Pilyapada. He argued that when you place a clay pot in a kiln, the atoms that don't just sit there. The tejas or the heat energy enters the Parmanu by itself. He understood that the heat causes the old bonds to break and new ones to form, changing the very color and texture of the object from the inside out. This is essentially the foundation of thermodynamics. Kanad realized that heat wasn't just a feeling, it was a kinetic force. He understood that for a pot to turn red, its fundamental particles had to undergo a vibrational shift. Modern science is built on the microscope, the idea that to understand the truth, we must build better tools to look outward. But Kanad's method was Darshana, the power of seeing by looking inward. While CERN uses 27 kilometers of magnets to find the God particle, Kanad used the stillness of his own consciousness. He proved that the human mind, when sharpened with logic and meditation, can perceive the fundamental laws of the universe without a single lens. It reminds us that technology is a crutch, but intuition is a wingspan. Kanad's greatest lesson wasn't just about atoms, it was about unity. If everything, the stars, the dust, the person you love, and the enemy you hate, is made of the same eternal Parmanu, then where is the division?
The distinction between me and you, or even living and dead, is just an illusion of scale. In my eyes, the universe is one continuous vibrating fabric. We are just different patterns in the same cosmic weave.
The God particle isn't just a triumph of physics. It is actually a bridge to the divine. We are starting to realize that knowledge isn't just a straight line to progress. It's a circle. Today, we are using complex mathematics to rediscover what the rishis perceived in the silence of the forests. When we look at the smallest particle, we aren't just looking at dead matter, we are looking at the signature of the Creator. As Kanad showed us, to understand the smallest atom is to understand the greatest truth. 2,500 years ago, a rishi looked at a grain of rice and saw the structure of the universe. Today, we build machines the size of cities to ask the same question. Perhaps the greatest laboratory was never CERN. It was the human mind. If you found this journey through Vedic physics enlightening, you might also want to deep dive into our video on the Karna paradox. Just as Karna teaches us about the laws of the outer world, the story of Karna teaches us about the laws of the inner world and how talent and skill can never give you inner peace if they aren't anchored into something deeper. So what do you think? Do you think the ancient intuition is more powerful than the modern instruments? Let me know in the comments. Let's bring the glory of our ancient rishis back to the modern world. I'm Janvik Ocean and this is Audiotale. Keep questioning, keep seeking. Namaste.